You spent $300 on a soundbar because the box said it would transform your living room. It didn't. The TV still sounds thin. The dialogue still gets lost under the music. The explosions still feel like they are coming from a single point in front of you. What nobody told you is that the problem was never your budget. It was that the box lied. And the lie gets more expensive the higher up you go. These are the 7 levels of soundbars. Level 1 runs from roughly $10 to $50, and that range is exactly where you find products like the Vizio V-Series 2.0 and the various Amazon Basics bars that appear at the top of every search result for people who want something, anything, to replace the sound coming out of a flat television. The goal of these products is not good audio. The goal is the absence of a specific problem, which is the experience of watching a film or a television show through drivers so small and so poorly housed that the sound they produce has nowhere to go and nothing to work with. The bar replacing them has marginally better drivers, slightly more cabinet volume, and no ambition beyond the task of solving that specific problem. There is no dedicated subwoofer. There is no crossover to sort which frequencies go where. There is no processing doing anything meaningful to the signal before it reaches your ears. What most people assume about this tier is that these are failed audio products. They are not. A $30 soundbar is a silence prevention device, which is a different category of object entirely. It does one thing. It does that thing adequately, and the only decision it requires is which model currently costs the least. Buy that one. Level 2 runs from $50 to $300, and this is where roughly 90% of soundbar buyers end up making their purchase. The Samsung 8WB550, the JBL Bar 300, the Yamaha YS209. The first thing that changes at this tier is the subwoofer. Bass is now a separate physical object that sits on your floor and produces low frequencies from a cabinet that has enough internal volume to actually do so, rather than a frequency the bar pretends to reproduce from drivers that are demonstrably too small for the task. For most rooms and most content, that is a meaningful change. The second thing that changes at this tier is the badge on the box. Starting around $200, Dolby Atmos appears in the product name on the packaging and prominently in the online listing. Dolby Atmos was engineered originally for commercial cinemas. It is an object-based audio system that places individual sounds as three-dimensional objects moving through space, including critically above the listener. For a soundbar to deliver genuine Dolby Atmos, it needs dedicated height channels capable of producing sound that reaches the listener from above their seated position. What a horizontal bar sitting below a television produces is your chosen format's audio data, decoded. The badge certifies that decoding. It says nothing about what happens physically between the driver and your ears. The best value at this tier is the Yamaha YS209 at around $250. Genuine 2-channel stereo separation across a width that actually moves, a wireless subwoofer that handles its job without drama, and no marketing claims it cannot back up with physics. The box does not say Dolby Atmos. The box knows what it is. But there is a specific reason the Atmos badge keeps appearing on products that cannot physically deliver what Atmos requires, and that reason becomes significantly more expensive as the price climbs past $300. Level 3 runs from $300 to $1,000, and this is where Dolby Atmos marketing reaches its highest intensity relative to what the physics actually permits. The Sonos Arc costs $899. The Bose Smart Soundbar 900 is the same price. The Samsung HWQ800C also appears in this tier. Upward-firing drivers appear at this tier. They are physical drivers aimed to fire sound toward the ceiling, on the theory that the sound reflects downward and returns to the listener's ears from above, simulating the overhead height channels that genuine Atmos requires. The theory is correct under a specific and fairly narrow set of conditions. The ceiling must be flat, acoustically hard, and non-absorbent. Smooth drywall or plaster qualifies. A sloped ceiling means sound bounces at the wrong angle and lands somewhere other than the listening position. A vaulted ceiling means the energy dissipates before the reflection returns. A ceiling fan directly in the sound path can intercept the beam. The ideal ceiling height is between 7 and 12 feet. Below 7 feet, the reflection arrives too quickly to feel separate from the bar, and the brain correctly identifies it as coming from the front. Above 12 feet, the sound loses energy across the distance and arrives too quietly to register as a distinct height channel. A large chandelier, heavy acoustic curtains, or even a low-hanging beam can prevent the effect from working entirely. What most buyers at this tier believe is that upward-firing drivers produce genuine overhead sound. They produce a ceiling reflection that the brain interprets as height under the right conditions. Those conditions are more specific than the specification sheet implies, and significantly rarer than the marketing suggests. The Sonos Arc has a second issue that has nothing to do with your ceiling. To use the product you paid $899 to own, you need a Sonos account. Basic setup and daily operation are gated behind a login that runs through Sonos servers. In 2024, Sonos released a redesigned app that broke core functionality for a significant portion of its user base, with owners unable to access EQ settings, complete initial setup, or in some cases operate the product at all for an extended period. The product you paid $900 to own is not fully yours. It is yours contingent on the continued operation of infrastructure belonging to a separate company, and that company has demonstrated that infrastructure can fail. That is information worth having before the transaction is complete. The tier above this is where something fundamental changes, and it has nothing to do with software or server dependency. Level 4 runs from $1,000 to $3,000, and this is the first tier where the surround claim becomes physically honest. Separate rear speakers enter the system. The Samsung HWQ-N90C at around $1,300 includes 2 wireless rear speakers that you position behind the listening area. The Sony HT-A9 at around $1,500 places 4 discrete units around the room. Sound is now arriving from behind you as well as in front of you, which is what surround sound has always meant, and what no single horizontal bar has ever been able to genuinely produce, regardless of what the processing does in the meantime. The Dolby Atmos badge begins to earn some of what it promises at this tier. Height channels are still handled by upward-firing drivers, and the same ceiling geometry still applies, but the rear of the sound field is now real rather than virtual. The surround effect is physically present. If you are looking at Samsung soundbars at this tier, there is a piece of context the product page will not volunteer. In 2017, Samsung acquired Harman International for $8 billion. Harman International owns JBL, AKG, and Harman Kardon, among other brands. When you visit the Samsung website and look at soundbar recommendations to pair with a Samsung television, some of those recommendations are JBL products. The television and the recommendation alongside it generate margin for the same parent company. That is not necessarily a reason to avoid either product. Both can be worth the money, but it is the kind of structural relationship a company has zero incentive to disclose, and the kind of thing you have every reason to know before the purchase goes through. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. I cover audio gear and what your money actually buys every week. Now here is where the soundbar concept starts doing something it has not done at any tier below. Level 5 runs from $3,000 to $10,000, and this is where the engineering stops being defensive and begins being genuinely ambitious. The Devialet Dionne, at approximately $3,000, brings SAM, speaker active matching, to a soundbar chassis. SAM is a signal processing system that continuously monitors the behavior of each individual driver and adjusts amplification in real time to extract maximum performance without distortion and without mechanical damage. The system profiles each driver and operates it at the limit of what that specific driver can safely do at every moment across the full frequency range. 17 drivers total, including 8 internal subwoofers in a push-push configuration designed to cancel cabinet vibration rather than amplify it. Room calibration measures acoustic response at the listening position and adapts the system's output to the characteristics of the room it is actually in, not the room the specification sheet imagined. The Sennheiser Ambeo Max, at approximately $2,500, brings 13 drivers, 5 dedicated tweeters, and acoustic processing developed with Fraunhofer, the same research institute that helped develop the MP3 format. The processing analyses the room's reflective surfaces and adjusts the beam forming to work with what the space provides, rather than assuming ideal conditions. Both products are doing something qualitatively different from everything below them. The mistake that buyers at this tier make most consistently is spending the entire budget on the bar and nothing on the room. A DVLA Dionne placed in an untreated room with hard floors, bare walls, a glass coffee table, and no soft furnishings absorbing high-frequency reflections will be outperformed in practical terms by a $300 bar in a room with a large rug, a fully cushioned sofa, curtains covering the windows, and furniture breaking up the first reflection points. The room is the most important component in any listening environment. At this tier, you have enough money to address both the system and the space. The tier above does not ask you this question. It assumes you already understood it before the conversation started. Level 6 runs from $10,000 to $100,000, and at this tier, the product does not arrive and then get installed. The installer arrives first. Brands like Steinway Lingdorf and Meridian operate here, and the process begins with a room assessment before any equipment is discussed. Acoustic measurements are taken. The system is specified to the physical characteristics of that specific room, rather than placed into a room and adjusted afterward. The design phase takes weeks. The purchase involves an authorized dealer, a site visit, and a configuration process that produces a system tailored to the space it will occupy, rather than a product placed inside it. The word soundbar has effectively ceased to apply. What you are acquiring is a multi-speaker array designed by acoustic engineers for a single physical address. One specific technical distinction separates this tier from everything below it. The crossover in a Steinway Lingdorf system is not a passive component sitting inside a cabinet. It is a digital signal processing algorithm that the company's engineers refine and push to installed systems via firmware updates. The system you own on the day you buy it is acoustically different from the system you own 3 years later, because the algorithm has been revised in ways that change what the physical drivers actually do. Whether that is the most compelling argument for spending this much money or the most unsettling depends entirely on how you feel about a company being able to change hardware you own through software you did not author. Both reactions describe the same fact accurately. Level 7 sits at $100,000 and above, and at this level the soundbar concept has been abandoned so completely that the discussion is no longer about products, but about installations, rooms, and the outer limits of what acoustic engineering can produce in a controlled physical space. CEDIA Expo is the world's largest professional custom installation trade show. In September 2025, Soundroom 7 at the Colorado Convention Center in Denver housed a 14.18.10 channel immersive audio configuration. 42 Ascendo speakers were positioned across every axis of a purpose-built room. A Christie Eclipse G3 projector valued at $400,000, one of the most powerful projection systems available anywhere. A Seymour Screen Excellence retractable screen that disappears into the ceiling when not in use. Storm Audio Processing. A total system cost of $1.3 million, not including installation. Executives from each participating manufacturer addressed the assembled press and industry professionals. Then the presenter pressed play. The dialogue was missing. An obvious echo ran from the front of the room to the back across the entire listening space. The hosts attempted to diagnose the issue and eventually asked the audience to please come back later. This was the world's biggest professional audio trade show. The room was built specifically for this demonstration. The system had been assembled by companies whose entire business is making exactly this kind of installation work. The margin for error at $1.3 million turned out to be identical to the margin for error at $30 human. Jeremy Kipnis in Redding, Connecticut spent $6 million and 3 years building what he called the Kipnis Studio Standard, 30 Macintosh amplifiers. 16 Snell T-Checks for reference subwoofers, 8 matching tower speakers, 3 center channel units, a laboratory-grade Stewart Snowmat screen measuring 18 by 10 feet, a room 33 feet long with a ceiling that rises from 8 feet at the rear listening position to 18 feet at the screen end. The electrical infrastructure required 2 external step-down transformers installed on his property, which Connecticut Light and Power took more than a year and considerable negotiation to approve. The monthly electricity cost of running the transformers alone ran higher than most people's rent. At the furthest extreme of this tier sits the CAT MBX, a custom installation with a documented cost of $16 million. Over 100 subwoofers, 21 channels, each speaker unit at approximately 5 tons of mass. No price list exists publicly. You contact the company directly and they respond if the project warrants a conversation. The engineering at this level is extraordinary by any measure. The budgets are geological, and as the CEDIA demonstration in Denver confirmed, the first day is still a rehearsal. The sweet spot in the soundbar market sits between $1,000 and $2,000, where separate rear speakers make the surround claim physically honest, and the Dolby Atmos badge finally earns a meaningful portion of what it promises. The Samsung HWQ990C or the Sony HTA9 paired with a room that has at least a rug, a full sofa, and curtains on the windows. That is the configuration where the majority of your money goes into acoustics rather than marketing. Below it, know what you are buying and buy accordingly. Above it, know what the room needs before you buy the system. And at $1.3 million apparently know that opening day is still a rehearsal.